Today's video, we are going to be talking about a very serious subject, so I want to place a trigger warning right here. We are going to be talking about abuse. I know we are now in November, so it's not Domestic Violence Awareness Month anymore, but that doesn't mean that we cannot keep spreading awareness about this issue. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence in their lives. Women between the ages of 18 and 24 are most likely to be abused by an intimate partner. The most dangerous time in a domestic violence relationship is when the victim is leaving. And the statistics are absolutely heartbreaking. 72% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner, and 94% of the victims in these murder-suicides are women. If you are going through this or you know somebody else who is, we will have many resources down below in the description box. But without further ado, let's have this very hard but very needed conversation. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we have a very special guest. This is my best friend since I was 15, so like half of our lives.
I know, it's crazy.
I know. Hold on,
We've been through a lot together. Thank you.
This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. She has purple, I do not, but I have this purple ribbon. Kind of keeps getting messed up, but that's me rocking the purple for this video. So Bethany actually works at a nonprofit for
domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, basically all of the issues that surround abuse.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. That's my job.
She knows so much about it, and she's so knowledgeable.
Well,
so I knew she'd be the perfect person for this.
Thanks, Shaylee. You really talked me up.
That's what I do. So, what's your story? How did you find yourself working at this organization, and
Definitely.
and what drew you to it?
Definitely. So, I worked my way through college. I was a flight attendant for like 7 years, and during that time, I came into a relationship which at first seemed like a good thing. He was very sweet. He gave me presents. He wanted to know what was going on in my life. Seemed really genuinely like he cared about me. It turned pretty controlling over time, definitely abusive, more in like the sense of like emotional abuse, manipulation, but he really gained that power and control over me. So I was in that relationship for about 2 years. There was a lot of threatening. He would threaten to kill himself if I ever left, and so that's part of what kept me in it for so long.
And he also threatened to kill you.
He did. Well, after I left, he did threaten to kill me as well. The good news is we had some distance between us, and so I think it would have been hard for him to do that, but I was genuinely afraid. So anyways, I had a really great support system. I had my friends, I had family.
But I didn't even know, like, and I feel like that's part of abuse, is like your loved ones don't really know what's going on behind the scenes.
I think most people in my life knew that something was off, but maybe didn't know the extent of it or didn't really know how to help. Because I had internalized a lot of what was going on. I thought it was my fault, and because he was controlling the narrative, right? So he wouldn't take responsibility for his actions. It was always something that I did wrong, or something that I could do better to fix the relationship. So I had internalized a lot of that, and I had really become like a shell of who I was before. Very insecure. My anxiety like spiked to the roof. Like it was hard for me to even go to the grocery store or look somebody in the eye or have a conversation without like feeling intense anxiety. So my body really like was telling me that something is wrong, but it took me a while to be able to come to terms with that, because I think I was trying to force it to work because I was too afraid of what would happen if it didn't work.
Right. I mean, he threatened you all the time, so it was like getting
Yeah.
out. You know, you can't just like leave a relationship like that. There's so much
Yeah.
fear that's attached to that. So
Right, exactly. So anyways, with that, like when I was finally able to break away from the relationship, shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
Poop hit the fan. And like it just turned into a complete mess. Like he was threatening me, he was messaging people I knew. I don't even know what he was telling them.
He was stalking my page, trying to find out information about you.
Yeah, stalking, trying to ruin my reputation, basically just trying to make my life a living hell. And so that's kind of when I really knew, wow, this is abusive.
And you started going to therapy too.
And I started going to therapy. So I was in counseling. I had a great group of friends to help me walk through that time. My family was really supportive. So I was really lucky to have all those supports. I also went to a domestic violence agency, which helped me with protection order stuff. From that experience, I knew that I just became really passionate about empowering other women as well, because it felt like I got like my life back, but better. Like I was like stronger. I felt more empowered. I was learning all sorts of things about boundaries. I just felt it was just like a fresh start.
Yeah.
After I got through that, so it was very empowering. And so I knew that I wanted to do something similar. Basically, you know, worked my way through college, knew that I wanted to work for a nonprofit, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wanted to work in the field of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. So, yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I do now.
So she took her pain and is now helping others who experience the same thing. So let's talk about domestic violence. So domestic violence is also called domestic abuse. I think when people think of domestic violence, they just think of physical violence within a relationship. What is the actual definition of domestic violence? How can we pinpoint it?
Well, domestic violence can look a lot of different ways. It's called many different things as well. So it might be called domestic violence, it might be called intimate partner violence, teen dating violence. And I think it's important to recognize that all of those things are basically the same. I know when I was going to counseling and my therapist told me, this sounds like a domestic violence situation. I was a little confused by that because I was thinking, well, we don't live together. Like, how is it domestic violence? Basically, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, it's a cycle of power and control that one person exerts over another person. It can look a lot of different ways, but it's really important to recognize that it's one person trying to gain that power over another person. So it could be through physical abuse. I mean, anything.
Sexual, mental,
sexual,
psychological, financial,
spiritual abuse, even intimidation, isolating somebody, cutting them off from all of their other supports. And a lot of these things are not done like in an obvious way. They're done in a very like manipulative way, so that you don't always realize what's happening. It could be, you know, your partner talking badly about your family members, talking badly about your friends, trying to pull you away from them in that sense so that they're able to be the one who holds the most influence in your life. Maybe discouraging you from getting an education, going to school, discouraging you from working, basically making you more and more dependent on them.
so that they still have full control
Yep.
over the decisions that you make and the life that you lead.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of it can happen in religious communities as well. Shaylee and I grew up in churches. We went to the same youth group. I don't want to speak for you, but I know for me, I internalized a lot of messages about female, like, submission. I mean, I don't know if I would have ever admitted that, to be passive, to be sweet, to be gentle, to be accommodating,
smiley,
right? Like, and your needs are not as important as a man's needs necessarily, or like the way you dress. Dress modestly so you don't cause guys to stumble or whatever. Like, so I think about that a lot, and a lot of the responsibility is put on a woman's shoulders. Our needs are always secondary. It's like, so when you get in this dynamic, this relational dynamic where your partner is not taking accountability for their own actions, where they're blaming you, where they're minimizing your feelings or your concerns, or they might even be like denying like things that they did that were abusive and hurtful. I think like you just naturally internalize a lot of that.
I know gaslighting can be a major part of abusive relationships as well, and gaslighting is where you start to question your own sanity because that person denies what they've said to you or what they've done to you, and so you start to think it's just you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you're in this dynamic where individuals are not taking responsibility for their own actions, the boundaries become really blurred.
I feel like a common question when people find out that a woman or a man has been abused or is currently being abused, it's why don't they just leave? Like, why are they putting up with it? Why are they staying in this relationship? Can't they just leave?
This is the cycle of abuse. And I think it's important to remember that, like, in abusive relationships, it's not always bad. There are good times too. And often, like, the memories of those good times is what keeps somebody in that relationship. So the cycle of abuse basically has the tension building phase. So that phase where you feel like you have to walk on eggshells. You have to be really careful of how you word things or how you do things because you don't want to upset the other person. That tension building phase leads to an explosion phase, and that's kind of where the abuse happens, whether it's verbal abuse or physical abuse. The abuser just losing it and going off on you. And then it kind of moves into this reconciliation phase. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's never going to happen again. I love you. You know I love you. I'm going to do better. And then it moves into a calm phase, which is also called the honeymoon phase. And there's a lot of love bombing that happens here. A lot of gifts, a lot of attention, a lot of really sweet affection and that sort of thing.
And this is probably the stage of the cycle where the victim feels safe again and they feel like, oh, maybe it will be different this time.
Yeah. Or maybe, maybe the victim was thinking about leaving the relationship, and then it gets back to this phase and they're reminded of all the reasons why they love and care about this person, and it becomes really hard to think about leaving. So I mean, there's so many like emotional factors involved. I mean, if you think about a person that you care deeply about, like whether it be a partner, whether it be a family member, and like all of those feelings exist in an abusive relationship as well. It's just that abuse occurs in addition to that. Victims of abuse might not have the support system. They've been isolated. They've been cut off from people in their lives.
Great example of that is the show Made. Yeah. I've only watched a few episodes with you, or I guess one episode, but that I think that does a really great job, like illustrating what it's like for a lot of women trying to leave an abuser, and then the system doesn't work for them, and this goes on all the time, every day, and you have people in your life right now that are being abused and you don't even know it, or maybe you are and you didn't even realize that you were. So it's like a very big problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's kind of cool that in that show, I've only still watched the first episode.
Yeah.
Or second episode.
It's hard to watch. It's so heavy.
It is, yeah. But I think it's cool so far. I don't know what happens like in the next episodes, but so far they've chosen a character who is dealing with like emotional abuse. And I would characterize it as physical abuse as well, because there's a lot of that physical intimidation.
Right, the punching of the wall.
Right, which is physical abuse.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Physical intimidation is physical abuse. So they
Right.
don't have to actually like punch you in the face, but if they threaten to punch you in the face or they punch a wall next to your face, that's physical abuse.
Yeah, exactly. And that escalates very quickly into, physically harming your body as well. I like that they chose a character who is dealing with emotional abuse, because I think sometimes we really minimize that as if it's not abuse. I've even had friends who are in abusive dynamics, and people, when they've tried to open up and tell people about it, they've been told, don't call that abuse. That's not abuse. But it is. I take all forms of abuse really seriously, because I do work in a safe house. That's about 80% of my job, I think. I do deal with some of the most like lethal cases of domestic violence, which is hard to see people go through that. But whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse, it really just eats away at somebody. It really just kind of makes you feel like you are not as important, like your needs are not as important. And one thing I like to tell people is that you are just as important as anybody else. You're not less important, you're not more important, you're just as important. Victims of abuse have forgotten that. Being through that myself, like, I know what it feels like. It's almost something that you just have to like relearn. So I would say the majority of my job is validating people, trying to help them to find their confidence and self-worth again, helping empower them, and realize that they can make it. They don't need that other person to be okay. They can make it on their own. Our lives are an accumulation of all these experiences that lead us to where we are now. One thing, to keep in mind is like this intersectional perspective. Certain groups of people may be at higher risk as well for domestic violence. Maybe somebody, a person of color, a person who has a disability, a person who speaks another language that's not widely spoken, or maybe doesn't have legal status here in the US. All of these different factors can be exploited, right? Abusers look for people that they can take advantage of. Being open-minded to all of those, I think about, people of color or LGBTQ+, any group of people that is already systematically oppressed. Those groups may also have higher rates of intimate partner violence as well. A lot of the times as humans, we will view things from our own perspective, like, well, I would leave. Well, I would do this. I would do this. Why aren't they doing that? If they're not willing to do that, it's their fault, whatever.
That's easy for us to say because we've never walked in their shoes. We don't have their experience. We don't know what they've been through.
Exactly.
And it's so invalidating to say those things to a survivor, and really can make them, once again, think that they're making up everything and go back to that abuser.
It reinforces the narrative of the abuser, right?
Yeah. And what's that statistic? It's like a woman leaves like seven times.
A woman, on average, it takes 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. And I mean, you think about that cycle of abuse. But you think about all the other factors of vulnerability, factors of control. And actually leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for a woman. It's important to empower survivors, whether they're still in the relationship or they're out of the relationship, recognize that they understand their abuser's the cycle of abuse. They understand all of his signs, all of it, you know, they know when it, like, the tension is building, when they have to walk on eggshells. They know the signs that something is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, you know, not to give people like generalized advice, I guess, or tell them what to do.
Right.
Like, they're the expert of their situation. Validate them, validate their experiences. You can talk about the cycle of abuse, you can talk about power and control, but doing it in a way that's like respectful and that's empowering to them. I like to stay away from questions of like why. Cases of like sexual assault too, like, why did you go there alone? Well, why did you wear that? Why did you do this? Because those statements like really bring a lot of shame on somebody. And they can make somebody feel like it actually just like ignores all of the other factors going on.
Yeah. And it once again is like perpetuating the idea that it is that person's fault. It's something that they did to cause that, and nobody deserves to be abused.
Exactly.
Nobody.
Supporting them, whatever decision they do make, because ultimately it has to be their decision. And if they're not ready to leave, they're not ready to leave.
Say like somebody's watching this video right now and they recognize, oh, I'm in an abusive relationship and I would like to leave it. What would you recommend?
Expanding your support system as much as possible. If you feel safe, if you feel like this person is going to be, you know, hold your information with confidentiality and not talk about it to other people. You know, if you feel like you have some safe people to talk to in your life, yeah, definitely talk to them about what's going on. The things that you need once you leave that relationship. This can be like important documents, keys, it could be a stash of money. You know what that is. So kind of having those things set up. Looking into your local domestic violence agency, nonprofit, getting help through there. I know a lot of those places help with protection orders. Some agencies have safe houses or other resources of places that you can go if you don't have somewhere to go. They will actually help with safety planning too. All of those that I know of, including the one I work for, have advocates, and we're called confidential victim advocates. So basically, when you come in, any information that you share with us is completely confidential. Nobody in the community knows that you came. So if that's a concern there, you know, those are safe places to go. When you think about lethality factors, having weapons in a home is a huge lethality factor. Planning around those is really important. If you're being stalked, that's another major lethality factor. Having a log of all the stalking incidents.
Document everything.
Yeah, document things, document the harassment.
Threatening texts and voicemails, all of that.
That's important as well. I know we're talking about safety planning, but it kind of got me on the train of thought of strangulation is another big one. Not everybody really knows how dangerous it is. It's extremely common. Like, I mean, just in like 2 major cases that I know specifically, wasn't Chris Watts, he strangled? Yeah.
And then recently with Gabby Petito, she was strangled as well.
Yeah. It wasn't until I got in this field that I recognized how common that is. And that really is like the ultimate way for an abuser to say, I have control over you, because they're literally controlling your next breath. It can only take 30 seconds before a loss of consciousness. It can only take 4 minutes before somebody dies. And, you know, when there is that loss of consciousness, that means that somebody came very close to death. I've worked with a lot of women who have been strangled, and have been strangled to the point of loss of consciousness, maybe urinating on themselves, and they still don't necessarily recognize how dangerous that is. Yeah, you can't always tell, you know, from the outside. Sometimes there are no marks. The reality is it's extremely dangerous, and so making sure that you get that medical attention, that you get it documented, but also, you know, that you get yourself checked out, because I've even heard of cases where, you know, someone's been strangled and they didn't see any signs of it immediately, but days later they pass away from it, because it does a lot of internal damage, and that you can't always see from the outside.
There's so many resources that will help you if you're experiencing this yourself, or if you know somebody who is. We're gonna link all of that in the description box. There's a few books in there and like different organizations.
Make yourself a priority, because when you've been mistreated, no matter what type of abuse, you know, are always looking out for that other person and not necessarily looking out for yourself. Or just having patience with yourself. If you experience anxiety, if you experience depression, these things are linked to domestic violence. They correlate with domestic violence. It's normal to deal with those things if you've been through trauma. And like I said, emotional abuse can be extremely traumatic. It doesn't have to be physical abuse to really like hurt you in that way. Also seeking out counseling or therapy if that helps you. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I've been in and out of therapy over the past 5 years. Like once I discovered it, I was like, this is great. I'm learning so much about myself.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so just give yourself grace, give yourself understanding, learn to love yourself again.
Talk to yourself in a kind voice, in a kind way, because chances are if you've experienced this dynamic in a relationship, you've been talked to very harshly, or you've been told things about yourself that are not true. And so to take back that power that you can give to yourself, and to talk to yourself in that kind voice, and to just really challenge the way that you're thinking about yourself. Are you thinking those things about yourself because this person who abused you said those things, or do you really believe those things? And just starting to work through that a little bit.
Come here, Max.
So you're gonna let you hold him. We have a cat joining us now.
What do you have to say,
Just don't attack my face, okay? 'Cause sometimes you like to do that.
He doesn't want to be here. Shaylee will link some resources. Always ask questions. I guess that's my last bit. You know, if something feels off, trust your intuition. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And just know who your supportive people are. I know who mine is.
Aww, same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and teaching us all of this. I really hope that this was helpful for at least one of you out there. I hope that there were some of you watching this video that maybe this is the first time that you realize that you're in this kind of a dynamic and you never understood it before. And so we are sending all of our love and support to you. And if you have any additional questions for Bethany, you can just put them in the comment box. And you can just come on here and respond to anything if anybody has any questions. But also, let's hype up Bethany, because she was so nervous to make this video.
I'm not a performer. And
you don't have to be.
Shaylee's so amazing because she just always has the right words.
No, I don't. I've just been doing this a really long time. But you can see how amazing of a person Bethany is. So I'm just glad that you're
And maybe one day I'll be brave enough to go on a live.
Yes.
I just know that there are thousands of you, so it's a little intimidating, but I'm sure you're all nice and wonderful, so someday. So cute.
So thank you guys for watching. Thumbs up this video if you enjoyed this content, and share with somebody that you think needs to listen to this today. And we love you guys. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in my next video. Bye.
Bye.